Hello, Scalamancy, Utopians, and of course the Darkly Courts. This is the second Take 3 video, and I'm recording these all on the same day, even though you guys have probably seen them probably a month apart. In this one, we're talking about Magic the Gathering. We're going to continue on with the themes of, we're going to take the continued themes, English, of character or player identity and character fantasy, and take them into Magic the Gathering this time. Where do I sit in Magic the Gathering? Last video was help me build choose my colors for my army. This one is help me build an EDH deck. Now, this one's going to be a little more into the character fantasy, player fantasy, but last time we saw that by the end, I decided I like Greywater Fastness more than Living City. This time, I already know what color I'm doing. It's more, what commander? I'm a green player. Actually, my two main decks right now, I have a bunch of cards in front of me, or deck boxes and stuff in front of me. Sorry for the shaky cam. My two main decks right now, you'll see a theme, are Lord Windgrace and I can never remember his name, Boom. Basically, Lord Windgrace is in my deck a lands in graveyard or play lands from graveyard, deserts, and landfall. Where Boon is Awaken Landfall, because I like Awaken's my favorite mechanic. And the two of them play similar but very different in the end. But what we're doing is we're going to fix this deck. My Mono-Green originally started as an Eldrazi, a Mono-Green colorless matters Super Friends deck. It was a weird idea I came up with where I gathered together every green planeswalker I had, threw them in, see how it worked or what they wanted, and then put a bunch of Eldrazi in because of it, or devoid Eldrazi. When I had it, the deck worked great. I'm a flavor over mechanics person, which you'll learn through the series, and if I do any other videos like this. I prefer a story to my decks, but the problem is I use a lot of Nisas with Eldrazi. It made no sense. So I changed this into Elemental Tribal with the +1/+1 counter theme, Proliferate. Still doesn't feel right. Now, going back into character fantasy, as I said before, I grew up in the woods, or in a house surrounded by woods and orchards. It was about a quarter mile, closest house was about a quarter mile. I rode my bike everywhere. We had old abandoned railroad tracks I'd ride my bike down where the wild raspberry vines grew, and you had trees and stuff making a burrow. Like we had the woods all around us. A little swamp between us and you walked out our front door, the house I grew up on, turn left, there's like a little swamp there. Separate a little bit of woods and goes into the orchards, and I spent a lot of my time there. Then when I would go to friends' houses, we'd spend times in the woods and whatnot. So my friends lived in the woods. It's a rural area. So a lot of times nature stuff takes precedence. But I like a learned path too. I like defense. In Magic, this translates over my favorite mechanics or mechanic family is land matters. My favorite tribe is Elemental, and I like to find a little bit of balance. Now, the commanders I kind of had for this deck, or I fight between for this deck originally, don't fully reflect that. It's these two. Freyalace is what I usually use, but Yorvil just fit really well when I switch it to elements. I probably will keep Freyalace as the commander as I like it, though Rayhan and wrong commander, the new Kamal, and a couple of the other green ones are looking very favorable. Might end up being the commander. I prefer partner commanders or planeswalker commanders myself. That's a personal preference. Sorry. So, how do I want to fix this deck? And what does that mean for player fantasy? Now, I'm going to try to make this a little shorter than the last video. Last video was too big for my phone to handle, so I had to split it up into two. When I look through the mechanics that I like, and I know I'm looking through the deck and not showing you guys, I like the idea of embracing the tribe. I like the idea of embracing land. Where they meet, I think that's why I chose the +1/+1 counters, is because they kind of meet in that space. Lands become elementals when you awaken them on a lot of cards. Actually, let me check that. I know I have the one green actual awaken card, but number of lands when you animate them, or number of animate cards, animate land cards, make them into elementals or fungus. I like fungus too. I've actually played mini Athala deck through the years. Now this deck I actually heavily leaned into. This deck I actually heavily leaned into the green fantasy. Now my player fantasy being, I liked lands. Now here's another possible commander, Multani. I kind of want to build or fix this deck to go closer to what? Oh yeah. I think it's that I have a minute of insight in here and stuff like that. I think how I want to fix this deck, sorry, is I want to lean a little heavier into land matters by putting some landfall in here, by putting some more dual face lands in here, like specifically the new ones. I like those 4 landfall. And just all around playing a little more towards that land theme. Maybe get an elemental commander or a land matters commander, moving Freya-Lace a little more to the back. And like cheapening out my stuff. I can't find that card. It doesn't matter. We're talking about what I'm building, not what I've had. Now, as I focused on proliferate, because those, originally planeswalkers and eventually 1/1 counters, that's another reason I put the 1/1 counters in there. I think I would move away from that and, as I said, focus on like the more elemental nature of it. But and give the player fantasy. Now I open to it. Awaken. Cast spell for 7. Wow, that's a lot. Also put 4 1/1 counters on target land you control. It becomes 0/0 elemental creature with haste. Still land. Yeah, so it does become an elemental. So I can lean into that awaken mechanic still, but I also kind of want that graveyard land interaction that I have in my Lord Windgrace. I think I want my green deck to exist in the space between those two decks, which isn't too hard to do. Both decks are more leaning green than anything else. But to do that, I have to say, do I really feel Freya-Lace is the best commander? Or would Multani be? Or do I use one of the partners? Or that's a question I need to ask. But also, as this take 3 is supposed to be me exploring the character fantasy, what is the character fantasy of my deck? In Magic, you play a planeswalker. You play the embodiment of a caster who's walking the blind eternities through different realms and fighting other planeswalkers. That's what the games are supposed to be, these Magic battles. When my wife and I talked about it a little bit, we decided to kind of take our cards, because we have a combined collection, and separate stuff that fits us best. I haven't done hers yet. I still got to search through all the cards for her pile. But when I did, what we did was we chose a couple mechanical families, and then 3 planes. My planes were Ixalan, Ikoria, and Zendikar. I kind of like the wild nature of all 3 planes, and I like how they approach land, as well as a few other themes I really enjoy. Mechanical themes I ran with. I think we did tribes too, but I'm not too worried about that right now. Mechanical themes I went with discard matters, colorless matters, including morph and manifest. All that whole morph family I threw in with colorless, but not artifacts. I'm talking about like the Void and Eldrazi and all that fun stuff. I love that theme, but I especially love morph, manifest, megamorph, and of course my land matters, because if anything, it's not a discard deck, it's a land deck for me. I think that's where I would kind of fall into this new deck, is kind of play a little bit into that discard. Green doesn't have much of that in there, but maybe see what I can in there, if any. Like, when I say that, I mean Spell Shapers and Madness, if there is any. I can't think off the top of my head today. But definitely playing into the land. Elemental Tribal I just love. I love all of those kind of like elemental races, like the Jin. I love the Aetherborn. I love the Afrits. I love the Tree Folk and Dryads. That's kind of like where I exist. But my favorite thing in Magic, thematically, is the green elemental, and it represents to me the embodiment of the marriage of land and flora, which we don't see. You know, in fantasy media, it's common to separate elemental magic from earth magic, or from nature magic, you know. Fauna magic never really touches elemental magic in a lot of media. You know, shamans versus druid in World of Warcraft, for instance. In Magic, you have a cross-section of that. It's called Green Elementals. I love that space, and it's the space I want to explore in my deck, because personally, you know, my player identity and my character fantasy I follow through with is I love exploring that boundary between the two. And Green Elementals do that for me. And it really captures, when I sit down and look at that fantasy, that marriage between the two, that's what triggers my dopamine centers when I think of player fantasy, or character fantasy. Sorry, I keep on mixing words. And when I sit down and think about that, that's how I put myself in the story. Now, you're kind of getting an idea of where I'm going with all this as a player. I'm someone who likes ordnance. I'm someone who likes casting. You know, I like using the negative as much as the positive. I like poison as much as the herb or herbalism. But I like walking that boundary between nature and earth, or nature and ground, nature and the elements. You know, the nature magic and the geomancy. I also like walking the ground between nature magic and the created, technology driven. I think that's just because I was really pushed to be that person who plays with technology, who toys with it. I really fell in love with the idea of creation and rebuilding at an early age. That's why I like geomancy so much. I felt like the only way I had control was when I was building something. And like after that, you know, I could create the world around me. That's why I like writing a lot. But my connection with nature is the one time I didn't feel like I needed that control. So that's where I kind of come from in there. So building off these themes, we're building further into what my player fantasy is. And that's going to, the next video, really pay off to see what I would put to paper with D&D. So now that we know where my love for this deck would be, I think what I need to do is sit down, figure out how I can incorporate more of that land matters, more of that player fantasy of shaping the world around me, or character fantasy, and play towards my player identity of that person who walks that line. You know? So that's another task figured out. We've got my army figured out. We got my Commander deck figured out. Now, how can we take this further? Well, Dungeons and Dragons, of course. And that will be our next video. And the last one currently. We might be doing more in the future. My wife and I have talked about doing us building my wife stuff for this too. But that will be, that'll be another time. Hopefully you're enjoying these, and hopefully, they're coming out on time. Hopefully they're not too much issues. And I'll see you in the next one. Sorry, I'm adjusting things in front of me, like putting my card boxes back so I can do the next one. I'll see you in the next one. What will seem like minutes for me will be a month for you. Y'all have a good day, and I love y'all.